Hi friends, I'm Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and today's video I'm focusing on a few decks from 1736. One is the Tarot of Marseille de Francois Chosson, which has been dated to 1736. However, there's recent discussion, maybe not so recent, about the possibility that it really, the images really date from 1672. Which we'll see when we get to the Two of Coins. So I don't know, how bigger, greater minds than mine can figure that out. But for now, it has the 1736 date, and it says that it's from Marseille. This particular deck was brought to us by Yves Renaud. Now, the second deck that I have from 1736 is a Tarot of Marseille by Piatnik. Now it says on the back, the deck of tarot consisting of 78 cards reprinted by Piatnik after the original of the 18th century. So I don't know exactly if it's a facsimile, but it kind of looks like a facsimile. And the date of the deck, the original deck created by Ignatz Krebs, Krebs, was 1736. Now this deck, I think it's out of print. I don't know, but it was, the box says it was printed in 1984, and as does the little book, right? So the book and the box are from 1984, and then the cards inside say that the deck itself was a reprint in 2006. And then the other deck that I'm going to compare it to is a Besançon, which isn't from 1736, but the date on the pamphlet says 1700. But from what I've read and from what I understand, the 1700 date is probably a little on the early side. So give or take, 50 years in either direction. If it was 1750 or something like that, it's not too far away from the ballpark date of 1736. So I'm going to include the Tarot Besançon by Il Meneghello in this little group. But bear in mind, we're not sure of that date, and it's certainly not exactly 1736. Now, the reason I'm doing this video is because on a tarot forum, people were discussing some decks from 1736, one of them being the Harry deck, which I thought I had, but I don't. I have the earlier version from the early 1700s. So I can't help them out, and I can't do a video on that deck like I thought I could because I don't happen to have it. But I thought it might be interesting just to do a few decks in that period of time. One being from Marseille, one being from Germany. The Krebs one is German. And then the Besançon deck, let's see if it's Swiss or where it says it's from. Hold on. Okay, so according to the Il Meneghello booklet, it says that this particular one is based on the Jurger, and Jurger sounds Swiss to me. So we have Swiss, Marseille from France, and then the other one from Germany. So let me flip the camera and get started. Okay, so here we have Swiss, German, and Marseille. So, obviously there's certain commonalities. The posture's the same. The outfit is fashioned almost the same way with scalloped edges to the sleeve. The headgear is similar between the German and the Marseille deck. We can't see enough of this one to know. We have a difference in name between the Besançon deck, the Swiss and the German and the French here. We have Le Mat as opposed to Les Faux. We have the tuft of grass kind of in the same spots. And we have this kind of bric-a-brac or whatever in the headgear, or that maybe that's some kind of netting on his head. I don't know. The devil's in the details, right? And sometimes when you look very carefully at things, for details that don't seem significant, maybe they are. Now in these two, the more Germanic decks, we have more red in the stockings, right? But in the French, it's blue. The hats are similar. There's curly hair in the German and the Marseille deck. There's a similar pattern to the sleeve in the French and the Besançon. I guess here too, we still have a certain amount of similarity. As for what's on the table, pretty similar. 2 cups and die, 3 die on the table. We have a couple circular objects in the 2 that are on the end. We have knives. We have something else here, like a card perhaps. That looks like a card, the 6 of diamonds. So that looks like a playing card, and a regular playing card. It might not be, but that's what it looks like. The bags are very similar. It definitely looks like a bag with a handle that's open. Interesting. Of course, we have Juno here, which would be irrelevant to the other 2. But we have the same configuration behind the figure. Either it's a veil or the back of a chair. They both have a book. They glance in the same direction. Here we have a difference in how they look. They glance. The deck from Marseille is more looking at us straight. She might have a slight glance to her left or to our right, but they basically, these 2 look more similar. And they all have the wing-like chair backs. They all have the scepter with the orb in their left hand. And we know that an empress or a queen or a king, if you look at any modern day videos that we have of Queen Elizabeth or now King Charles or any other queens and kings we might have access to see, they always would hold their scepter properly in the right hand. So the fact that this is in the left hand tells me that it probably should have been in the right hand. So when we see a lot of images of kings and emperors and empresses with their scepters in the left hand, I think it's safe to assume that it's a reversal of how it was intended to be. And if that's the case with these particular cards, then it could be the case in other cards, all the cards. Who's to say? We have the shield again on the left side. If it would be on our left side, it would be on their left side if it were accurate to the scepter being held in the right hand. The crowns are the same, and the scepter with the orbs are the same, and the clothing is pretty much the same. And the eagle, there's a little variation in the eagle, but less between the Besançon and the German than with the French. Now, bear in mind, Sullivan Hissmans is coming out with a version of the Chosson, and I'm getting that. I'll be receiving that. It's the first deck I've bought since my moratorium. And, he and others, I think, believe that the Chosson as I mentioned earlier, might actually be dated from 1672, in which case it would make it one of the earliest that we're aware of, at least, type 2 TDMs. And we'll see, I'll explain that when we get to the Chariot, for example, or the Lover card. Okay, so here we have great similarity. Now here, we notice that the Emperor is holding his scepter in what would be the correct hand, his right hand. So it seems as though, you know, this was portrayed accurately. So now we have the Empress who holds it in her left hand, but the Emperor who holds it in his right hand. So there's no way to know which cards, unless they have telltale signs like this, which cards might have been reversed and which ones were printed in the proper way. I hope I made myself understood. Now we notice like the fluting at the bottom of the hem of his blouse, and it's not quite the same here. But the headgear, again, in these two, is more similar. This one is slightly different. Not altogether different, but slightly. This one has an embellishment at the back of his chair, but he's got the gold chain, as does this guy. But in the Krebs, there's no embellishment on the back of his chair, not like this at least. And there's a rooster on the back of the Besançon, or some kind of bird. I don't know if it's a rooster, maybe a falcon. And then notice the eagle glancing in a different direction in the deck from Marseille. But the clothing, again, in the Besançon, the Swiss and the German, have the red pants, right? Whereas the one from France is blue. Now, I don't know how much liberty was taken with the publishers of these particular decks to change clothing, but, you know, I'm thinking these are more or less facsimile decks, so I don't know that they played with colors all that much. Okay, so for obvious reasons, we're going to skip Jupiter in the Besançon and compare the Krebs and the Marseille Chosson deck. Okay, so we have two gentlemen with the tonsure. We have this indication of the stigmata on a reference to the stigmata on gloves, gloved hands. We have a similar crown, or whatever that would be called for a pontiff. We have the triple tiered thing, and it's in his left hand rather than his right. But, you know, the hand doing the benediction, I don't know if a pope or a priest would use the right hand for the benediction or the left, so I'm not sure in this case which would have been accurate. But somebody who's devoutly Catholic or knows things about how, you know, the benediction might be done, maybe you can comment below. We have two individuals with tonsured heads, and one of them has a hat in each. Okay, we have a blindfolded Cupid in the Besançon. We do not have a blindfolded Cupid here, and we do not have a blindfolded Cupid in the Chosson. But the participants are otherwise very similar, right? We have a fella in the center, and he is flanked in all cases by two women. And the direction of Cupid is this way in the Krebs and the Chosson, but it's more downward in the Besançon. So I hope, you know, by doing these videos that, you know, some people just sometimes want to see comparisons between decks, you know, that they don't have access to. And hopefully Hopefully I satisfy that. Okay, now the Chosson, I mentioned before that it may be the earliest of the style TDM2, and I mentioned in reference to like the lover card is not blindfolded, as it would not be in TDM2. In TDM1, we have the scalloped edge. So we know that the Besançon and the Krebs, the Swiss and the German, these decks have been influenced by the style of TDM1, whereas the Chosson is not. We have a TDM2 style. Now, TDM1 and TDM2, I've mentioned it many times, it does not necessarily indicate year. We have, I think a TDM1 from 1743. It was one of the videos I did not too long ago, right? So it's not so much about the date. It's more about, I think, the style that was predominant in that area when the deck was created. Okay, we have similarity in the posture of the two horses in the Swiss and German. In the French, they both glance in the same direction. But in the Swiss and German, they glance at one another. Other than the scalloped canopy, we have the chariot, broken in half with horses down below and then the charioteer up above. He holds the scepter in his right hand. So that would be accurate. They all have moon epaulets. I think that's the moon. And they're crowned beings with, a plate of armor on their chests. A GS here, simply a heart here, and FM here, FI or FJ, excuse me. Now, interestingly, the Swiss and German deviate in having the chair back be different, and the German is more in keeping with the Marseille. And all three of the scepters are held in the right hand of the figure of justice. And in the Marseille deck, although she's front-facing, she glances to her right. But the other two decks, she stares us down, as I think we see in the Noble, right? And she stares us down in the Noble. And we have the winged chairback. Okay, now check out the Hermit, which is very similar between the Swiss and the German deck, right? He has the same kind of look. He's a little different here. In these two, he's more or less hooded. I guess the hood kind of slipping off his head a little bit, but he's hooded here. Whereas in the Marseille deck of Chosson, he's not hooded, not even remotely hooded. And in these two, his cloak kind of covers the arm a little bit that's holding the lantern, but it's covering his, it's the cloak of the Marseille deck is covering the arm that has the lantern, whereas in these two decks it is not. But in all three, he's going in the same direction, and he holds his walking stick in his left side, his left hand. In all, he is an elder because he has a beard. That seems to be white and gray. We don't know about him, but him. Okay, this ought to be interesting. In the German and Swiss, the Swiss and German, we have what looks like a flame to the left. The wheel goes this way. It seems to go in the same direction here, but now there's a monkey with a tail that could look like a flame, so who knows? The image atop the wheel is holding a scepter in its left hand. So here we have fortitude or force. And they're kind of similar in all three. The hand here is on the snout. It looks like it could be just in the mouth here. Here it's on the snout. And the fingers of the left hand are in the mouth as they are here or close to it, but not here. No, again, I don't know how significant any of these details are, but it may be significant to someone who is looking at those kinds of things. Here we have les pendus, 12 being the number associated with the hanged man. This, which is the reversal of the way that 12 is typically done. Some people would argue, oh, well, it's, the way it's, could have been written this way. And I wasn't there at that time, so I don't know. But I know clocks from that period would not have this kind of 12. They'd have this kind of 12 on the clock. So I don't know, about that argument. All three of their legs are bent. The same leg is bent in all three. The same type of gallows. Of course, they're all three awake. In keeping with the Italian decks, where he would be awake also. Remember, it was kind of like a wanted poster, and if he was dead or asleep, you wouldn't be able to identify who the individual was. Part of the punishment was the mortification of the family and the shame and the disgrace. So they wanted them to be recognizable, right? Because if they were at large, we had to find them. And if they weren't at large and if they were caught, it was still part of the disgrace to be recognizable. Okay, so here we have an interesting difference. We have the Besançon. The death card is going to our left, and the other two are going to our right. All three have scythes held in the right hand of death in the Besançon, held in the left hand of the German and French decks. A great similarity between the German and French decks regarding what's on the ground and the same placement. Very similar. We have the hands, in the same spot. We have a face in the corners. We have corner faces here too, where things are a little bit different in the Besançon. Plus, in the Besançon, his headgear is a little bit more articulated. The gesture in all three and, the wings are very similar. In fact, these wings almost look like they're modeled after the same source, don't they? This one is a little different. As is how this wing falls behind the arm in the same way in these two, right? And then, of course, the clothing is the same, pretty much the same. And here it's a little different. Okay, so in the Swiss deck, we have the furry legs. We don't have them in the German deck, and we don't have them in the French deck. In fact, the German and the French deck in this case are more similar, and this one is a little different, a little more different. I think I'll end it at the end of the Triumph cards because it'll otherwise be too long. Perhaps if anyone is interested in seeing the pip cards of these three decks, tell me and I'll do a video of the pips. So here we have the tower, and in each they have the same name. The Tower of God or the House of God. So we have like a great similarity between what's coming from the heavens in these two decks. It's a little different in this one, but in all three, the top of the tower has a crown-like look, or reminiscent of a crown, particularly in these two. They each have 3 windows with a Roman arch. And they each have 2 people who have fallen. And these two, again, are more similar in that the people who fall, one is in front and one is behind. We have the star card in all 3. Reminds us of the Aquarius constellation. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stars here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here. And 8 here as well. They all look in the same direction. These two are more similar in that they have a tree with a bird in the same position. So, you know, is it possible that card makers caught glimpses? Because in some instances, these two are more similar, and then in some instances, these two decks are more similar. So is it possible that they picked and chose the images that they preferred to pick and choose, right? Or maybe they had disparate cards from different decks, and those were the ones they had at hand, and those were the ones they copied. Here we see that the jugs fall below the skyline. You see the horizon line, and these are higher, right? Higher than the jug. But in the Besançon, they're above the horizon line. Again, I don't know who that might interest, but I noticed those kinds of things, and maybe if you do too, it might be interesting. Okay, another case of TDM1, where we have the front-facing moon. And then with the Chosson, we have the side-glancing moon. In all cases, though, it could be some type of celestial event, like some type of what's the word? It escapes me. Eclipse. But, you know, the essential ingredients are the same. We have the 2 towers, we have the 2 canines, we have the crustacean. And we have the similar wall in the background of the Swiss and the German. We still have a wall in the French, but it's different. But in all 3, the sun looks at us, you know, just looks at us straight down, and you know, straight at us. In these 2, we have beyond the rays, we have these evaporation marks. It almost looks like evaporation marks, right? And here, they're lower. They're not surrounding the sun, but they're more toward the bottom. In all three, the youths are touching one another, or they're embracing, or they're in some type of holding hands or something. So there's a familiarity between those two figures, whether they're brother and sister or brothers, it's hard to tell. These figures look a little more feminine, but who knows? This guy has a mustache, I think. And here we have the angel card, or the judgment card. He has a banner attached to his trumpet here, no banner here, no flag. And he has a flag here. So these two in this case share that commonality. They also share the embellishment above the figure, right? The wind, or whatever that might be, the cloud formation. We have in all three what appears to be a tonsured individual in the middle. He has what looks like a tonsure there. He is not blue. The center figure is not blue in the Besançon, but he is blue in the other two. He's got a bluish tint here, and he's got a bluish tint here. Now, what could it mean that he's blue? Well, maybe he's just more dead than the other two. The other two are not coming out of sarcophagi. He's the only one who's coming out of the sarcophagi. So maybe these people are alive, right? And it's just the reckoning is happening for them as well. But it's also happening for those who have passed on. And the fact that he has a tonsured head could maybe be nothing more significant than we're all judged, whether we're pious in life or we're just ordinary people. I don't know what the purpose of the blue tonsured individual or the tonsured individual is in the center, but it could be just something like we're all going to pay the piper, right, at some stage, whether we're pious or not. And we see a little bit of that in the death card, right, where we see crowns on the ground. Let me see if I can find it. Let me pull. Yes, indeed. In all three of the death cards, we do see reference to people of different social status, right? We have a crowned figure here. Death will come for him, right? Just as well as he'll come for the average person. And we have crowned figures in these other two decks as well. And then the last triumph card is the world card. And in these two, we have the reversed C, right? In these two, we have flowers in the corners or the designated areas of the wreath. We don't see that here. But the evangelists seem to be, the symbols of the evangelists seem to be in the same spot for all of them. And in the case of the German and French decks, we appear to have a female. Here it's less decidedly so. And so I'm going to call it a day for now, and I will do the pips of these decks if anyone, all it takes is one person to say, show us the pips, and I'll do it. But it's already at 35 minutes almost, and I'm going to call it a day. Thank you for being here. Until next time, friends, peace and stay well.